I was lying in that hospital bed when I asked my daughter to do one final thing for me. It wasn't money. It wasn't forgiveness. It was just a small, simple request, or at least that's how it sounded. But Emily didn't even hesitate. She shook her head right there in front of the nurse, her voice cold and sharp. "No, Dad. I'm not cleaning up another one of your secrets." The room went silent. I looked at her, really looked this time, and realized she had already decided who I was years ago. "You'll regret this," I said quietly. "When you finally understand." She turned away. And in that moment, I knew she had no idea what that request really meant. If this moment made you feel something, don't just scroll away. Tell me honestly in the comments, have you ever judged someone you loved before, knowing the whole truth? And where are you watching from today? What time is it there right now? If stories like this speak to you, take a second to like and subscribe. It helps more than you think, and it tells me I'm not telling this story alone. If you had met my daughter 10 years ago, you would have thought she was the kindest person in the room. Emily used to laugh easily. She used to sit at the kitchen counter while I made coffee in the mornings, asking me questions about everything from how to fix a leaking faucet to why her mother always insisted on Sunday dinners, even when we were exhausted. Back then, she looked at me like I knew what I was doing. I haven't seen that look in her eyes for a very long time. These days, when Emily looks at me, it feels like she's reading a case file she's already decided. She lives in New York now, in a high-rise apartment with glass walls and a view that probably costs more than everything I've owned in my entire life. She's a corporate attorney, the kind that negotiates deals people like me never even hear about. She's successful, respected, and precise in everything she does, including how she keeps her distance from me. We don't talk much. Maybe a phone call every couple of months, always short, always polite. Birthdays reduced to a text message. Holidays? Well, those stopped feeling like holidays a long time ago. People assume that kind of distance happens suddenly. That there's one big argument, one moment, where everything falls apart. But that's not how it happened with us. It happened slowly, quietly, like a door closing inch by inch until one day you realize it's locked. After her mother, Daniel, passed away, everything in our house changed. Daniel had been the center of everything. She was the one who kept conversations going, who remembered small details, who made sure Emily and I never drifted too far apart. When she died, it wasn't just grief that filled the house. It was silence. At first, Emily and I tried to hold things together. We ate dinner at the same table even when neither of us had much of an appetite. We talked about school, about work, about the small, ordinary things that felt strangely important in the absence of anything else. But grief has a way of changing people differently. Emily wanted answers, structure, something she could hold on to. I didn't have that to give. Instead, I started leaving. Not all at once. Not in a way that could be easily explained. Just gone more often. At first, it was a day here and there, then a weekend, then stretches of time long enough that Emily stopped asking when I'd be back. She asked once, though. I remember that. She was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, arms crossed, trying to look stronger than she felt. "Where do you go?" she asked. I could still see the child in her eyes then. The part of her that still expected me to tell the truth, to explain everything in a way that made sense. I should have. Instead, I said the one thing I thought would protect her. It's complicated. I told myself she was too young to understand. That one day when the time was right, I would explain everything. But time doesn't wait for explanations. And silence writes its own story. Over the years, Emily filled in the blanks herself. In her version, I wasn't trying to protect anything. I was avoiding responsibility. In her version, I chose to disappear instead of staying. In her version, I let her grow up alone. And the worst part? From the outside, it probably looked exactly like that. I didn't argue when she pulled away. I didn't chase her when she moved out. I didn't correct her when she started telling people that her father had never really been there after her mother died. Because correcting her would have meant breaking a promise I wasn't ready to break. So, I let her believe it. I let her build a life that didn't include me. And now, sitting in this hospital room, watching the way she stood by the door, instead of coming closer to the bed, I could see exactly where all those years had led us. She wasn't angry in the way people expect. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, just distance. Controlled, intentional, final. "Do you need anything else?" she asked earlier, her tone professional, almost detached, like she was speaking to a client instead of her father. I looked at her for a moment before answering. There were 1,000 things I could have said. I could have told her I missed her. I could have told her I was sorry. I could have told her the truth I had been holding on to for years. Instead, I asked her for one thing, and she refused. Now she stood near the window, her back partially turned to me, checking her phone, as if there were more important things waiting for her outside this room. Maybe there were. "I didn't ask you for much," I said quietly. She didn't look up. "You asked me to deliver something to a stranger. That's not much, Dad." Her voice carried that edge I had come to recognize over the years. Not loud, not emotional, just firm. Like a decision that had already been made. "She's not a stranger," I said. Emily finally looked at me, then her eyes narrowing slightly. "She is to me," she replied. "And that's what matters." I nodded slowly, more to myself than to her. That was the problem, wasn't it? Everything that mattered to me didn't exist in her world anymore. "The box," I said, glancing toward the small wooden container on the bedside table. "Just take it to Margaret Cole. That's all I'm asking." She let out a quiet breath, shaking her head. "No," she said again. "I'm done being part of things I don't understand. I'm done fixing whatever mess you're still hiding." Mess. That word stayed in the air longer than anything else. I wondered, not for the first time, how many years of silence it took to turn a father into a problem that needed to be managed. "It's not a mess," I said. "That's exactly what you always say," she replied. There it was. Years of conversations reduced to patterns, predictable, unchangeable. I studied her face for a moment, trying to memorize it in a way I hadn't allowed myself to do before. The sharp lines, the controlled expression, the distance she carried, like armor. She looked so much like her mother. And yet, in this moment, she felt further away than anyone I had ever known. "You think you know who I am?" I said quietly. "I do," she answered without hesitation. I almost smiled at that, not because it was funny, but because it was so certain, so absolute, and so completely wrong. "Then there's nothing I can say that will change your mind," I said. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence between us said everything. Outside the room, I could hear the faint sounds of hospital life continuing, as if nothing inside this space mattered. Footsteps in the hallway. A distant announcement over the intercom. The quiet rhythm of machines doing their work. Time moving forward, whether we were ready or not. "I won't ask you again," I said after a moment. That got her attention. She looked at me, really looked this time, as if trying to understand what I meant. "Good," she said. Because my answer won't change, I nodded. I know. And I did. That was the hardest part. Not that she refused, but that she refused because of who she believed I was. I turned my head slightly, looking at the ceiling, letting the weight of everything settle in a way it hadn't before. For years, I had told myself there would be time. Time to explain. Time to fix things. Time to show her the truth. But time has a way of slipping through your hands while you're waiting for the right moment. And sometimes, the right moment never comes. Unless you force it. I closed my eyes for a brief second, then opened them again. Emily, I said. She didn't move, but I knew she was listening. If you walk away from this, if you leave that box here. I paused, choosing my words carefully. You're not just refusing me. She frowned slightly. Then what am I refusing? I looked at her, holding her gaze this time. The chance to understand who your father really was. She didn't answer, but I saw something shift in her expression. Not enough to change her mind. Not yet, but enough to plant something. A question. A doubt. And sometimes, that's where the truth begins. There's a moment in every broken relationship that people like to point to. A single argument, a single mistake, a single day when everything changed. But when I think about Emily and me, there isn't just one moment. There are dozens. And the worst part is, I remember almost all of them. The day she stopped waiting up for me was one of the first. She was 16 then, old enough to pretend she didn't care, but still young enough that she sat on the couch with the TV on low, glancing at the door every few minutes. That night, I came home past midnight. I remember opening the door slowly, trying not to make noise, already rehearsing the same quiet explanation I had used before. But she was still awake. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. Not angry, not even surprised, just tired. Did you eat? She asked. That question hit me harder than anything else she could have said, because it wasn't really about food. It was about everything I hadn't been there for. I grabbed something, I answered, setting my keys down like it was just another ordinary night. She nodded as if she expected that. Then she turned off the TV. Okay, she said. I'm going to bed. No argument, no questions. And somehow that silence hurt more than any accusation. After that, she stopped asking where I went. Stopped asking when I'd be back. Stopped asking anything at all. And I let her. Because every time I looked at her, I saw Daniel. Not just in the way Emily smiled, or the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, but in the expectations she carried. Daniel believed in honesty, in showing up, in being present, even when it was hard. And every day that I failed to live up to that, I felt like I was failing her all over again. So instead of facing that, I ran from it. Not in the obvious way people imagine. I still paid the bills, still kept the house, still showed up just enough that no one could say I had completely abandoned my responsibilities. But emotionally, I wasn't there. And Emily knew it. She started changing in small ways at first. She became more independent, more self-sufficient. She got a part-time job earlier than most of her friends. Started managing her own schedule, her own responsibilities, her own life. People praised her for it. She's so mature, they would say. She's got her head on straight, and I would nod, pretending I had something to do with that. But the truth was, she became that way because she had to. Because she learned very quickly that relying on me wasn't an option anymore. The real breaking point came the year she graduated high school. That's the moment she never forgave me for. And honestly, I'm not sure I would forgive me either. Her graduation was on a Friday afternoon. She had reminded me about it weeks in advance. Not casually, not in passing, but directly, clearly. I want you there, she said. I remember the way she looked at me when she said it. Not demanding, not angry, just hopeful. And that made it worse. "I'll be there," I told her. I meant it when I said it. At least, I think I did. But that morning, I got a call. The kind of call that pulls you away from everything else. I won't explain it yet. Not because I don't want to, but because understanding it now wouldn't change how it looked from Emily's side. From her side, all that mattered was this: I didn't show up. She stood there in her cap and gown, scanning the crowd, watching other parents cheer, wave, take pictures. And I wasn't there. By the time I got home that night, she was already waiting. Not on the couch this time, not pretending everything was fine. She was standing in the middle of the living room, still wearing her graduation dress, her face pale and rigid, in a way I had never seen before. "You said you'd be there." She was standing in the middle of the living room, still wearing her graduation dress, her face pale and rigid in a way I had never seen before. "You said you'd be there," she said. There was no shouting, no tears, just that same quiet tone that had started replacing everything else. "I know," I replied. "Something came up." She laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It wasn't even angry. It was empty. "Something always comes up," she said. I tried to explain, tried to tell her it wasn't what she thought, that it mattered, that I had to be there. But every word I said only made things worse, because none of it answered the one thing she needed to hear: why she wasn't enough. "I waited," she said, her voice finally cracking just slightly. "I kept looking for you. I thought maybe you were just late." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, because there was nothing I could say that would fix that moment. Nothing I could say that would give her back what she lost. "You always have a reason," she continued, "but you never have time." That was the first time she said it out loud. The thing that had been building for years. "You weren't there when Mom died," she said quietly. "You weren't there after. And now, you weren't there for this either." "That's not fair," I said, even though part of me knew it was. "Fair," she repeated. "You want to talk about fair?" Her eyes locked onto mine then, and for the first time, I saw something I had never seen before. Not just disappointment, not just anger, but finality. "I stopped expecting you to show up a long time ago," she said. "Today just proved I was right. That was the moment. Not loud, not dramatic, but irreversible. After that, everything between us shifted." She left for college a few months later. We helped her move into her dorm, carrying boxes up narrow staircases and pretending we were just like every other family. But even then, there was a distance, a careful politeness, like we were already strangers trying to play familiar roles. Before I left, I stood in the doorway of her room. "You'll call if you need anything?" I asked. She didn't even look up from unpacking. "You'll figure it out," she said. And she did. She figured everything out on her own. Law school, her career, her life. Without me. And over time, she built a version of me in her mind. A version that made sense of all the times I wasn't there. A version that explained the silence, the absence, the broken promises. In that version, I didn't have a reason. I didn't have a purpose. I just didn't care enough. And the longer I stayed silent, the more that version became the truth she believed. So when she stood in that hospital room, now refusing to take the box, refusing to do one last thing for me, it wasn't really about the box. It was about everything that came before it. Every moment I didn't show up. Every answer I didn't give. Every truth I chose not to tell. And in her eyes, this was just one more thing I was asking her to carry for me. One more burden. One more secret. One more disappointment. But what she didn't understand, what she couldn't understand yet, was that this time, it wasn't about me at all. Hospitals have a way of slowing everything down. Not just time, but thought, memory, even emotion. The first night I was admitted, I barely slept. Not because of the machines or the steady rhythm of footsteps in the hallway, but because every time I closed my eyes, I kept replaying the look on Emily's face. Not angry, not even disappointed, just finished. That's the word that stayed with me. Finished. Like she had already decided there was nothing left here worth saving. A nurse came in sometime after midnight to check my vitals. She was young, probably not much older than Emily had been when things first started falling apart between us. "You should try to get some rest, Mr. Prescott," she said gently as she adjusted the monitor beside my bed. "I've had worse nights," I replied. She gave me a polite smile, the kind people use when they don't quite know what to say, then left the room as quietly as she had entered. The silence returned almost immediately. I turned my head slightly, my eyes landing on the small wooden box sitting on the bedside table. It didn't look like much, just a simple, worn piece of wood. The edges softened with time, the surface marked by years of handling. Most people wouldn't have given it a second glance, but to me, it carried more weight than anything else in that room. I reached out slowly, my hand trembling slightly as I rested my fingers on the lid. For a moment, I considered opening it again, not because I needed to see what was inside. I already knew every letter, every photograph, every folded document by heart. But because touching it reminded me why I had made the choices I did, why I had stayed silent, why I had let Emily believe the worst of me. I pulled my hand back. No, if I opened it now, I wasn't sure I'd have the strength to close it again. Morning came in pieces, a pale light through the window, the distant hum of activity building in the hallway, the sound of carts rolling past, voices murmuring just beyond the door. And then Emily. She didn't knock, just pushed the door open and stepped inside like she had somewhere else to be, which, knowing her, she probably did. She was dressed in a dark blazer, her hair pulled back neatly, her posture straight and composed. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was heading into a meeting instead of visiting her father in a hospital bed. "Good morning," she said, glancing briefly at me before setting her phone down on the small table near the window. "Morning," I replied. There was a pause, not the kind filled with tension, the kind filled with nothing. "How are you feeling?" she asked. It sounded like a question she had asked 100 times before, practiced, expected. "Like I'm in a hospital," I said. She gave a small nod as if that answer confirmed something. The conversation could have ended there. In fact, for a moment I thought it would. She checked her phone again, scrolling through something, her expression unreadable. I watched her quietly. There was a time when I knew exactly what she was thinking just by looking at her. Now, I couldn't even tell if she wanted to be here. "I spoke to your doctor," she said after a moment. "They're running more tests today." I nodded. That's what they told me. Another pause. She didn't ask if I was scared, didn't ask if I needed anything, didn't move any closer to the bed. Everything about her stayed carefully distant. "You don't have to stay," I said. She looked up at that. "I'm already here," she replied. It wasn't warmth. It wasn't concern, it was obligation. And somehow that made it harder. I glanced again at the box on the table. She followed my gaze. For a brief second, something flickered across her face. Recognition. Or maybe annoyance. Is that the same box? She asked. Yes. She let out a quiet breath, turning her attention back to her phone. I thought we were done with that conversation. We are, I said. I told you I wouldn't ask again. Good, she said without looking up, but her tone had shifted slightly. Not softer, just less certain. I leaned back against the pillow, studying her. Do you remember your mother's old cedar chest? I asked. That caught her off guard. Her fingers paused mid-scroll. What she said, frowning slightly. The one at the foot of your bed when you were little, I continued. You used to keep all your drawings in it. Every single one, even the ones you didn't like. She stared at me for a moment, clearly not expecting the change in subject. Yeah, she said slowly. I remember. You wouldn't let me throw any of them away, I said with a faint smile. Even the ones that were just scribbles. That's because you always tried to throw things away, she replied. There was a hint of something in her voice then. Not quite anger, but not neutral either. Only the ones you said you didn't want, I said. I was a kid, she said. I didn't know what I wanted. Exactly, I replied. She frowned slightly, as if trying to understand where I was going with this. What does that have to do with anything? She asked. I nodded toward the box. Sometimes the things we don't understand yet are the ones that matter the most later. Her expression tightened almost immediately. There it was again, that wall. That's not the same thing she said. Those were drawings. This is whatever that is. It's the same idea, I said gently. No, it's not, she replied sharper now. Because those drawings were mine. This isn't. Silence fell between us again. But this team, it felt different. Less empty. More. No, it's not, she replied sharper now. Because those drawings were mine. This isn't. Silence fell between us again. But this time, it felt different. Less empty. More charged. I'm not asking you to carry something for me, I said. She let out a quiet, almost incredulous laugh. That's exactly what you're doing. I shook my head slightly. No, I said. I'm asking you to see something. I've seen enough, she replied. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was firm, final, or at least she wanted it to be. I studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right, I said. She blinked, clearly not expecting that. That's it, she asked. That's it, I replied. Something about that answer unsettled her. I could see it in the way her shoulders shifted slightly, in the way her eyes lingered on me just a second longer than before. You're just going to drop it, she asked. I told you I would, I said. She hesitated, then glanced at the box again. For the first time since she walked into the room, she actually looked at it. Not dismissively, not annoyed, but curiously. What's in it? She asked. There it was, the question I had been waiting for. Not forced, not demanded, chosen. I held her gaze for a moment before answering. Something you've been missing for a long time, I said. She frowned. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now. She stared at me, searching for something, an explanation, a clue, a reason to dismiss what I said. But this time, she didn't find one. Instead, she looked back at the box, and for the first time since all of this started, she didn't turn away immediately. It was small, barely noticeable, but I saw it. That hesitation, that crack in certainty. And I knew the story she had believed for years was starting to shift, even if she didn't realize it yet. The question lingered in the room long after Emily asked it. What's in it? She hadn't meant to ask. I could tell by the way her posture stiffened right after the words left her mouth, like she regretted giving the question any weight at all. For years, she had trained herself not to be curious about me. Curiosity leads to questions. Questions lead to answers. And answers might force her to reconsider everything she believed, so she avoided all of it. Until now. I didn't answer her right away. Not because I wanted to be difficult, but because I needed to be careful. This wasn't just about telling her what was inside the box. It was about whether she was ready to hear it. You've been missing something for a long time, I said finally. She frowned, clearly unsatisfied. That doesn't mean anything, she replied. You keep saying things like that, like there's some big revelation waiting, but you never actually explain anything. I know, I said, and you expect me to just trust that she asked? There was a sharpness in her voice now, but underneath it something else. Frustration. Not just with me, but with the fact that she didn't have control over the situation. Emily has always needed control. It's how she survived. It's how she built her life. And right now, standing in that hospital room, she didn't have it. You don't have to trust me, I said. You never did. That's not true, she snapped. I raised an eyebrow slightly. Isn't it? She hesitated, and in that hesitation I saw it. The truth she didn't want to admit. There was a time she trusted me completely, a time when my word was enough. But that time was long gone. You lost that a long time ago, she said, quieter now. I know, I replied. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with everything we weren't saying. She glanced at the box again, then back at me, then away, like she was fighting with herself. Why her? She asked suddenly. Why this Margaret Cole? There it was. Another question, another crack. I leaned back slightly, letting out a slow breath. Because she's the only one who can give you what's inside that box, I said. Emily frowned. That doesn't make any sense. It will, I replied, when she demanded, when you're ready to hear it. She let out a short, disbelieving laugh. That's convenient. It's not meant to be convenient, I said. It's meant to be honest. Honest, she repeated. You want to talk about honesty now? Her voice rose slightly, not enough to draw attention from the hallway, but enough to break through the careful composure she had been holding on to. For years you disappeared without explanation, she continued. For years you gave me half answers and vague excuses, and now suddenly you're talking about honesty. I didn't interrupt. She needed to say this. You don't get to do that, she went on. You don't get to act like there's some deeper meaning behind everything when you never even gave me the basics. I know, I said again. That seemed to irritate her even more. You keep saying that she snapped, like it fixes something. It doesn't. I admitted. Then why say it? Because it's true. She stared at me, her jaw tightening slightly. I needed you, she said, her voice quieter now, but far more intense. After Mom died, I needed you to just be there. Not mysterious, not complicated, just there. I swallowed slowly. Every word she said landed exactly where it was meant to. I know, I said again. She shook her head. No, she said, you don't. Because if you did, you would have chosen differently. That word, chosen. As if everything I did had been a matter of preference. As if I had weighed her against something else and decided she wasn't enough. I didn't have a choice, I said quietly. She froze. For a split second, something flickered across her face. Then it was gone. Yes, you did, she said. You always had a choice. Not the kind you think, I replied. She shook her head again, more firmly this time. There you go again, she said, talking in circles, making it sound like there's something bigger when there isn't. There is, I said. Then say it, she challenged. Right now. No riddles, no vague statements. Just say it. The room seemed to hold its breath. This was it, the moment where everything could change or break completely. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw it. The anger, the hurt, the years of distance, but also something else. A small, fragile part of her that still wanted an answer, even if she didn't trust it. I could tell her, right now. I could open the box, take out everything inside, lay it all in front of her, and finally explain the truth I had kept hidden for so long. But if I did, it would take something away from her. The choice, the journey, the understanding that comes from discovering something instead of being told. And more than that, it would break the promise. I couldn't do that, not yet. I can't, I said. Her expression hardened immediately. Of course you can't, she said. You never can. It's not because I don't want to, I said. Then why? She demanded. Because it's not mine to tell, I replied. That stopped her. Completely. She blinked clearly, not expecting that answer. What does that even mean? She asked. It means, I paused, choosing my words carefully, the truth doesn't belong to me alone. She stared at me, confusion replacing anger for the first time. That doesn't make any sense, she said again, but this time her voice lacked the same certainty. It will, I repeated, when she asked softer now. I looked at the box, then back at her. When you decide to find out, I said. Silence. Longer this time. Heavier. She looked at the box again, really looked at it. Her eyes lingered on the worn edges, the small imperfections in the wood, the way it sat there quiet and unassuming. And yet somehow demanding everything. I'm not doing this, she said finally, but the words didn't land the same way they had before. There was hesitation now, doubt. I'm not going on some emotional scavenger hunt because you suddenly decided to be mysterious at the end of your life, she continued. I nodded. I understand. Do you? She asked. Yes. Another pause. She picked up her phone, then set it back down again almost immediately. A small, restless movement. You really think I'm going to change my mind? She asked. I met her gaze. I think you already have. Her eyes narrowed slightly. No, I haven't. Not completely, I said. But enough. She didn't respond, didn't argue, didn't walk away. And that told me everything I needed to know. Because for the first time in years, Emily Prescott wasn't certain anymore. Emily didn't stay much longer after that. Not because she had somewhere urgent to be, but because she didn't trust herself to stay. I could see it in the way she picked up her phone again, then set it down, then picked it up once more, like she needed something to anchor her back into the version of reality she understood. I should go, she said finally. It sounded like a decision she had already made before she walked into the room. I nodded. I know. She hesitated, just for a second. Her eyes drifted toward the box again, then quickly away. That hesitation was new, and she knew it. I'll check in later, she added, almost as an afterthought. Of course, I said. She turned toward the door, her movements precise, Kant toward the door. Her movements precise, Kant rolled, like she was stepping back into a role she understood better than this one. Just before she reached for the handle, she stopped. Didn't turn around, didn't speak right away. But I could tell something was still there. Rolled, like she was stepping back into a role she understood better than this one. Just before she reached for the handle, she stopped. Didn't turn around, didn't speak right away. But I could tell something was still there unfinished. Why didn't you just tell me? She asked quietly. The question hung in the air. It wasn't angry. It wasn't sharp. It was something else entirely. Tired. I took a slow breath. Because some truths don't belong to one person, I said. She didn't respond, didn't argue, just nodded slightly like she had heard me but didn't accept it. Then she left. The door closed softly behind her, and the room felt smaller, not emptier, just heavier. I lay there for a long time after she was gone, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of the machines beside me. There's a strange kind of loneliness that comes from being misunderstood. Not the kind where no one is around, but the kind where someone is and still doesn't see you. I had lived with that feeling for years, but for the first time, I wondered if it was starting to shift. Not because Emily suddenly believed me, but because she had asked questions, and questions change things, even if people don't realize it right away. Emily didn't go home. Not immediately. She sat in her car in the hospital parking lot for nearly 20 minutes, her hands resting on the steering wheel, her eyes fixed on nothing in particular. The city around her moved like normal, cars passing, people walking in and out of the building, a life continuing completely unaware of the quiet storm unfolding inside her. She exhaled slowly, leaning her head back against the seat. This is ridiculous, she muttered to herself. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and opened her email. Work. Something familiar. Something predictable. Something she could control. There were dozens of messages waiting for her. Contracts to review. Clients asking for updates. Deadlines approaching. Normally, this would have pulled her in immediately. But today, the words blurred. Her focus slipped. Her mind kept drifting back to the same thing, the box. She closed her eyes for a moment, frustrated. I'm not doing this, she whispered. She had made her decision. She wasn't going to get pulled into another one of her father's vague, half-explained situations. She had spent too many years cleaning up emotional confusion that never led anywhere. Not this time. Not again. She opened her eyes, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. But instead of heading toward the highway, she turned in the opposite direction. She didn't notice it at first. It wasn't a conscious choice, just a small shift. A hesitation at an intersection. A turn that didn't quite match the route she had planned. It wasn't until she had planned. It wasn't until she was halfway down a quiet street lined with older houses that she realized she wasn't going home. She frowned slightly, glancing at the road ahead. What am I doing was halfway down a quiet street lined with older houses that she realized she wasn't going home. She frowned slightly, glancing at the road ahead. What am I doing? She murmured. She slowed the car, then pulled over to the side. Silence filled the space around her again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was crowded. With questions. With doubts. With memories she hadn't allowed herself to revisit in years. She thought about the way her father had looked at her. Not defensive, not angry, just certain. That certainty unsettled her more than anything else. because it didn't fit the version of him she had built in her mind, in her version. He avoided answers. He deflected. He made things complicated so he wouldn't have to face them. But today, he hadn't done that. He had refused to explain, but not in the same way. There was something deliberate about it, something controlled, and that bothered her, because control was supposed to be her strength, not his. She leaned forward slightly, resting her forehead against the steering wheel. "Margaret Cole," she whispered. The name felt unfamiliar, disconnected, and yet important. She didn't know why. She shouldn't care. But she did, and that made her uncomfortable. Emily straightened, letting out a slow breath. "This doesn't change anything," she said firmly. She started the car again, this time turning back toward the main road. But even as she drove, the thoughts didn't stop. They shifted, expanded, became harder to ignore. She remembered the box, the way it looked. Old, handled, important, not like something thrown together at the last minute. Something kept, protected, for years. Her fingers tightened slightly around the steering wheel. "What's in it?" she murmured again. The question felt different now, heavier, more personal. She shook her head, trying to push it away. "It doesn't matter," she said, but the words didn't feel true. She reached into her bag without thinking. Her hand brushed against something solid. She froze. Slowly, she pulled it out. The box. She had taken it without even realizing. At some point before leaving the hospital room, she had picked it up and kept it. She stared at it now, sitting in her lap. Her heart began to beat a little faster. "I didn't agree to this," she said under her breath. But her hands didn't move. She didn't put it back, didn't push it away. Instead, she ran her fingers lightly over the surface, feeling the texture, the worn edges, the quiet weight of it. It didn't feel like a secret. It felt like something waiting. Emily swallowed slowly. "This doesn't mean anything," she repeated. But deep down, she knew it did, because whether she wanted to admit it or not, she had already crossed the first line. She had taken the box, and once you take something like that, it's almost impossible to pretend you don't care what's inside. Emily didn't open the box right away. She told herself she wouldn't, that whatever was inside, it didn't matter. That she had already spent too many years being pulled into things she didn't understand, things that always ended the same way. With silence, with disappointment, with more questions than answers. So she placed the box on the passenger seat beside her, drove home, walked into her apartment, set her bag down, changed out of her blazer, poured herself a glass of water she didn't drink, moved through every step of her routine like it could anchor her back into normal. But nothing felt normal. The box followed her, not physically, but in her mind. Every room she walked into, it was there. Every thought she tried to focus on, it was underneath, waiting. By the time the sun had set and the apartment was filled with that quiet evening stillness, she realized something she didn't want to admit. She wasn't avoiding the box. She was delaying it. There's a difference. Avoidance is final. Delay means you already know what you're going to do. Emily stood in the middle of her living room staring at the couch. The box sat there now exactly where she had placed it when she came in. Unopened, unmoved, but somehow louder than anything else in the room. "This is pointless," she said under her breath. Her voice sounded smaller than she expected. She walked toward it slowly, stopped just a few steps away, crossed her arms, uncrossed them. Then, almost out of frustration, she reached down and picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. Not just physically. There was a weight to it that didn't make sense. As if everything inside it mattered more than it should. She turned it over in her hands. No lock, No obvious mechanism, just a simple lid. So easy. Too easy. That's it, she murmured. Part of her expected something more complicated. A key, a code, something that justified the secrecy. But this was just a box. And yet, her hands hesitated, because opening it meant something. It meant crossing another line. It meant admitting she cared. It meant letting him be right. Emily exhaled slowly. "I'm just checking," she said quietly, as if she needed to justify it to someone, to herself. She sat down on the couch, placed the box in her lap, and lifted the lid. For a moment, nothing happened. No dramatic revelation, no immediate understanding. Just paper, neatly stacked, carefully preserved. She frowned slightly. "That's it," she repeated, but her hands were already moving. She picked up the first envelope. Old, yellowed slightly at the edges. Her name wasn't on it. Instead, another name. Margaret Cole. Her fingers tightened slightly. She opened it. The paper inside was folded carefully, as if someone had taken their time with it. As if it mattered. She unfolded it slowly and began to read. And, "Dear Benjamin, I don't know how to thank you. There aren't enough words for what you did for me and my family. When we lost everything, when I thought there was no way forward, you showed up. Not just once, but again and again. Quietly, without asking for anything in return. I asked you why you were helping us, and you said something you'll never forget. Because someone once did the same for me. I still don't know who that someone was, but I hope one day they know how far their kindness reached, because it reached us too. You told me not to tell anyone. You said it wasn't about recognition. But I need you to know it mattered. You mattered." Margaret, Emily stared at the letter. Her eyes moved across the words again and again, like she was expecting them to change. "They didn't," she whispered. The words stayed the same. Simple, clear, impossible to ignore. She reached for another envelope. This one had a different name, a different handwriting. She opened it quickly now. "Mr. Prescott, I don't think you remember me, but I remember you. You paid for my tuition when I had no way to continue. You told the school it was an anonymous donation, but I saw your name on the paperwork. I never said anything because I knew you didn't want me to. I graduated last year. I'm working now, helping others the way you helped me. I hope that's what you wanted. Daniel Ruiz." Emily's breath caught slightly. Her fingers trembled just enough that she had to steady the paper. "No," she said softly. This didn't fit. This didn't match the story she had lived with for years. Her father, helping people, quietly, repeatedly. She shook her head as if that could push the idea away, but her hands kept moving. Another letter, another story, another person, different names, different places. But the same pattern. Benjamin Prescott, showing up, paying for things, helping people, and then disappearing. No recognition, no explanation, no trace, except these letters. Emily leaned back against the couch slowly, the box still open in her lap, her mind struggling to catch up. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered. But it did. In a way, she didn't want it to. She thought about all the times he had been gone, all the nights he didn't come home, all the moments she had filled with assumptions. What if, she swallowed, what if he hadn't been avoiding her? What if he had been doing this? Her chest tightened slightly. No, she said quickly. That doesn't change anything. Because even if it was true, even if every letter in that box was real, he still wasn't there. He still missed her graduation. He still left her alone. Helping others didn't erase that. It couldn't. And yet, it complicated it. It blurred the clear line she had drawn between right and wrong, between what he did and what she believed it meant. Emily looked down at the box again. There were more letters, more stories, more pieces of something she didn't fully understand yet. Her hand hovered over them. Then slowly, she reached in again. Because whether she wanted to admit it or not, she had already started. And there was no way to stop halfway through the truth. Emily did not sleep much that night. It was not because she kept reading the letters. In fact, she forced herself to stop after a while, closing the box and placing it on the coffee table, as if putting distance between herself and everything inside it would bring her clarity. It did not. Instead, the silence of her apartment became louder. Every thought circled back to the same place. Her father. The man she had spent years reducing to a simple explanation. Absent, unreliable, emotionally unavailable. That version had always made sense. It had been clean, logical, and easy to live with. But now, for the first time, it felt incomplete. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the letters in her mind. The handwriting, the gratitude, the repeated pattern of quiet help, followed by silence. It did not match the man she believed she knew, and that unsettled her more than anything else. Around 3 a.m, she gave up on sleep. She got out of bed, walked back into the living room, and stood there for a moment staring at the box again. It had not moved, but it felt different. Like it was no longer just an object. It was a question. One she could no longer ignore. Emily crossed the room slowly and sat down. She opened the box again, this time without hesitation. Her hands moved more deliberately now, sorting through the contents with purpose instead of confusion. Letters, receipts, old photographs, names, dates, patterns. She noticed something this time that she had missed before. Addresses. Several of the letters had returned addresses, different cities, different states. But one appeared more than once. A small town in Pennsylvania. She frowned slightly and picked up one of the envelopes again. Margaret Cole. Same name, same location. Her fingers tightened slightly around the paper. This is where he wanted me to go, she said quietly. The realization settled in slowly, not like a sudden revelation, more like a piece clicking into place. For the first time, the request did not feel random. It felt intentional. Emily leaned back, holding the letter in her hands. Her mind moved quickly now, trying to process everything at once. If these letters were real, if these stories were true, then her father had been living a life she knew nothing about. Helping people, supporting strangers, disappearing for reasons that had nothing to do with abandoning her. And yet, he never told her. Not once. That part still did not make sense. She closed her eyes, briefly exhaling. You could have just said something, she whispered. The words felt hollow even as she said them, because deep down she already knew the answer. If it had been that simple, he would have done it. There was a reason. There had to be. And that reason was sitting somewhere inside this box, or waiting for her in that town. Emily opened her eyes again and looked at the address. Pennsylvania, a few hours away, close enough that she could drive there. The thought came quietly, almost casually, but once it appeared, it did not leave. "I'm not going," she said out loud. The words felt like a line she was trying to draw. A boundary, but her voice lacked conviction. She looked around her apartment. Everything was exactly where it should be. Ordered, predictable, controlled. This was the life she had built. A life where she understood everything. Where nothing surprised her. Where nothing required her to question the past. And suddenly, it felt smaller than it had before. Emily stood up slowly, walked toward the window, looked out at the city lights stretching endlessly into the distance. This was where she belonged. This was where everything made sense. So why did she feel like something was missing? Her mind returned to the hospital room, to the way her father had looked at her. Not defensive, not guilty, just certain. That certainty bothered her, because it suggested something she was not ready to accept. That he had been telling the truth, not in words, but in silence. Emily turned away from the window and looked back at the box, then at the letter still in her hand, then back at the box again. "This is a mistake," she said quietly. But she was already moving. She grabbed her phone, opened her calendar, cleared the next 2 days without thinking too much about it. Her fingers moved faster than her thoughts. Then she paused, staring at the screen. This was the moment, the decision, the point where she could stop, close everything, put the box away, return to the version of her life that made sense. Or she could go and risk finding out that everything she believed about her father was wrong. Her chest tightened slightly. Not from fear, but from something else. Uncertainty. Emily exhaled slowly, then closed the calendar. Decision made, not fully accepted, but made. She moved quickly after that, packed a small bag, grabbed her keys, picked up the box, and paused for just a second at the door. Her hand rested on the handle. Her eyes drifted back toward the apartment behind her. Everything familiar, everything safe, everything known. Then she looked down at the box in her hand. Unknown, complicated, unsettling, important. She opened the door, stepped outside, and closed it behind her. The hallway felt colder than usual, or maybe it was just her. Emily walked toward the elevator, her steps steady, but her mind anything but. As the doors closed in front of her reflection, she caught a glimpse of herself, composed, controlled. But her eyes told a different story, one she was only beginning to understand. The elevator descended slowly, each floor passing like a quiet countdown. She did not know exactly what she would find. She did not know if she was ready for it. But for the first time in years, she was willing to find out. And that changed everything. The drive to Pennsylvania felt longer than it should have. Not because of traffic or distance, but because every mile seemed to carry a different version of the same question. What if I am wrong? Emily kept her hands steady on the wheel, eyes focused on the road ahead, but her mind refused to stay in one place. The letter sat on the passenger seat beside her, the box closed, but not forgotten. Every so often her gaze drifted toward it. Not out of curiosity anymore, out of something deeper. A quiet unease that had settled in her chest and refused to leave. She had spent years believing she understood her father. Not completely, but enough. Enough to explain his absence. Enough to justify her distance. Enough to build a life that did not depend on him. But now that understanding felt fragile. Incomplete. Like it had been built on something that was no longer holding. By the time she reached the small town listed on the envelope, the sun was already beginning to lower in the sky. The streets were quieter than she expected. Old houses, small storefronts, a pace of life that felt slower, more deliberate. Emily parked her car near a corner cafe and sat there for a moment, her fingers resting lightly on the steering wheel. "This is it," she whispered. The words sounded strange, like she was standing at the edge of something she could not fully see yet. She reached for the letter again. Margaret Cole. The address matched a modest house a few blocks away. Emily stepped out of the car, the air cooler than in the city, carrying a faint scent of leaves and something else she could not quite place. She walked slowly, not because she needed time, but because she was not sure what she would say when she got there. What do you say to someone who knows a version of your father you have never seen? She stopped in front of the house. It was smaller than she expected. Simple. Well kept. A small garden near the front, carefully tended. Nothing about it suggested anything extraordinary. And yet, something about it felt important. Emily stood there for a moment, her heart beating just a little faster than usual. Then she stepped forward and knocked. The sound echoed quietly through the stillness. A few seconds passed, then footsteps. The door opened slowly. An older woman stood there, her expression cautious, but not unkind. Her hair was silver, pulled back neatly, her posture straight despite her age. "Yes?" she asked. Emily swallowed lightly. "I'm looking for Margaret Cole," she said. The woman's eyes shifted slightly, studying her more closely now. "I'm Margaret," she replied. "Can I help you?" For a moment, Emily did not speak. This was her. The name from the letters. The person her father had insisted she find. My name is Emily Prescott," she said finally. Something changed immediately. Not dramatically, but enough. Margaret's expression softened, her eyes widening just slightly in recognition. "Prescott," she repeated quietly. Then she stepped back, opening the door wider. "You should come in," she said. Emily hesitated for only a second before stepping inside. The house felt warm, not just in temperature. There was a sense of care in everything. Photographs on the walls, books neatly arranged, a lived-in space that felt steady and real. Margaret gestured toward a chair. "Please sit," she said. Emily did, placing the box carefully on her lap. Margaret's eyes immediately dropped to it. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she looked back up at Emily. "He finally gave it to you," she said softly. Emily frowned slightly. "You knew about this?" she asked. Margaret let out a quiet breath, nodding slowly. "I was wondering how long it would take," she said. "That doesn't answer my question," she said. "That doesn't answer my question," Emily replied a bit more sharply than she intended. Margaret did not seem offended. Instead, she studied Emily carefully. "You look like him," she said. Emily stiffened slightly. "I'm not here for that," she said. "I know." Emily replied a bit more sharply than she intended. Margaret did not seem offended. Instead, she studied Emily carefully. "You look like him," she said. Emily stiffened slightly. "I'm not here for that," she said. I know, Margaret replied gently. You're here for answers. Emily hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Margaret's gaze shifted briefly to the box again, then back to Emily. Have you opened it? She asked. Yes. And you read the letters? Yes. Margaret smiled faintly. Then you already know part of the story. No, Emily said quickly. I know what those letters say. That doesn't explain anything. Margaret tilted her head slightly. Doesn't it? She asked. No, Emily replied firmly. It doesn't explain why he wasn't there for me. There it was, the real question, the one everything else circled around. Margaret's expression softened further, but there was something else there now, too. Understanding. Sit with me, she said quietly. Emily was already sitting, but something in the way Margaret said it made her feel like this was something more. A moment. A shift. Margaret moved slowly to the chair across from her and sat down. For a few seconds, she simply looked at Emily, not judging, not questioning, just seeing her. Your father saved my life, Margaret said finally. The words landed simply, but heavily. Emily blinked. What? She asked. Not in the dramatic way people like to imagine, Margaret continued. There was no single moment, no heroic act. It was quieter than that. She paused, her gaze drifting briefly toward a photograph on the wall. My husband died when my children were still young, she said. We lost everything not long after. The house, the savings, the sense of stability. I was drowning, if I'm being honest. Emily listened, her grip tightening slightly on the box. And then your father showed up, Margaret said. Emily frowned. Why, she asked. Margaret smiled faintly. That's the question I asked him, too. And what did he say? Emily pressed. Margaret's eyes returned to hers. He said someone once did the same for him. The same words from the letter. Emily felt something shift inside her. But that doesn't explain anything, she said again, though her voice was quieter now. It explains more than you think, Margaret replied. Emily shook her head. No, she said. It doesn't explain why he kept leaving. Why he missed everything that mattered. Margaret leaned forward slightly. Do you think he didn't know that? She asked gently. Emily froze. The question caught her off guard. Of course he knew, she said. He just chose something else. Margaret studied her for a moment, then shook her head slowly. No, she said. He chose something that cost him everything. The question caught her off guard. Of course he knew, she said. He just chose something else. Margaret studied her for a moment, then shook her head slowly. No, she said. He chose something that cost him everything. Emily frowned. What does that mean? Margaret did not answer immediately. Instead, she reached out and placed her hand gently on the box. This, she said softly, is not a collection of good deeds. Emily's breath caught slightly. It's a record, Margaret continued. Of promises. Promises, Emily repeated. Margaret nodded. Your father made a promise a long time ago, she said. One that he never broke. Not once. Emily stared at her confusion mixing with something else. Something closer to fear. What promise? She asked. Margaret looked at her carefully. The room seemed to hold its breath again. The kind that changes everything, she said quietly. And for the first time since this began, Emily felt like she was standing on the edge of something far deeper than she had imagined. Emily did not realize she had stopped breathing until Margaret reached out and gently touched her hand. It was a small gesture, soft, grounding, but it pulled her back into the room. Take your time, Margaret said quietly. Emily inhaled slowly, her chest tightening as she tried to steady herself. A promise, she repeated. Her voice sounded distant even to her own ears. Margaret nodded. Yes. Emily leaned back slightly in her chair, her eyes flickering toward the box again. All those letters, all those people. Not random acts, not generosity for the sake of kindness. A promise. Something deliberate. Something binding. What kind of promise? Emily asked. Margaret did not answer immediately. Instead, she stood up slowly and walked toward a small cabinet near the wall. She opened it carefully and took out a thin folder. Worn, protected, handled many times over the years. When she returned, she placed it gently on the table between them. This is the part he never wanted anyone to see unless it mattered, she said. Emily's gaze fixed on the folder. Her pulse quickened. Why show me now? She asked. Because you're here, Margaret replied simply. Emily hesitated, then reached forward. Her fingers brushed against the surface of the folder before she opened it. Inside were documents, old, carefully preserved, some typed, some handwritten. She pulled the first one out. It was a hospital bill, dated more than 20 years ago. The amount was high, higher than she expected. Her eyes scanned the page quickly, then stopped. The name, Emily Prescott. Her breath caught. This is mine, she said. Margaret nodded. Yes. Emily frowned, confusion tightening across her face. I don't understand, she said. Why would this be here? Margaret did not speak. She waited, letting Emily see, letting her connect the pieces. Emily flipped through the rest of the documents. More bills, more records, medical reports, all from the same period. All reports, all from the same period. All connected, all tied to her. Her hands began to tremble slightly. I was sick, she said slowly. Yes, Margaret replied. Emily swallowed. I remember some of it, she said. But Mom always said insurance covered everything, connected, all tied to her. Her hands began to tremble slightly. I was sick, she said slowly. Yes, Margaret replied. Emily swallowed. I remember some of it, she said. But Mom always said insurance covered everything. Margaret's expression softened, but there was something else there now. Something heavier. It didn't, she said gently. Emily looked up sharply. What, there was a point where the insurance stopped covering your treatment, Margaret explained. The costs became too high, too frequent. Emily shook her head immediately. No, she said. That's not what I was told. I know, Margaret said. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the air itself had shifted. Then who paid for it? Emily asked, though something inside her already knew the answer. Margaret held her gaze. Your father. The words landed harder than anything else she had heard so far. Emily blinked. Once, twice, as if trying to process something that did not fit into her understanding of reality. That's not possible, she said quietly. It is, Margaret replied. Emily looked back down at the documents, the dates, the amounts, the consistency. This was not one payment. This was years. Years of expenses. Years of effort. Years of sacrifice. Her fingers tightened around the paper. But he was never there, she said. Her voice broke slightly. Not when it mattered. Margaret leaned forward gently. "He was there," she said. "Just not in the way you expected." Emily shook her head again, more forcefully this time. "No," she said. "Being there means showing up, being present, not disappearing." "And what would you have chosen?" Margaret asked softly. Emily froze. The question hit differently, sharper, more direct. "If you were in his position," Margaret continued, "and you had to choose between sitting beside your daughter's hospital bed or working every possible hour, finding every possible way to make sure she could stay in that bed and receive treatment, what would you have chosen?" Emily's breath caught. She opened her mouth to answer, then stopped, because suddenly the question was not hypothetical anymore. It was real, painfully real. "He didn't have both options," Margaret said quietly. "He didn't have the luxury of balance. It was one or the other." Emily's eyes filled, though no tears fell yet. "You're saying he chose money over me?" she asked. Margaret shook her head immediately. "No," she said firmly. "He chose your life." Silence, heavy, unavoidable. Emily stared at the documents in her hands. The truth was there, clear, undeniable, and yet it did not erase the feeling of being alone. "That doesn't change what it felt like," she whispered. "I know," Margaret said softly. "And he knew that too." Emily looked up again, her expression breaking slightly. "Then why didn't he tell me?" she asked. "Why let me believe he just didn't care?" Margaret exhaled slowly. "Because of the promise," she said. Emily's heart pounded. What promise? Margaret's gaze softened further. "One night," she said, "when you were very sick, your father was told something he never shared with you." Emily's grip tightened. What, she asked? "The doctors weren't sure you would make it," Margaret said quietly. The words seemed to echo in the room. Emily felt the ground shift beneath her. No," she said, shaking her head. "I would remember that." "You were too young," Margaret replied. "And your mother wanted to protect you from that fear." Emily's chest tightened. "So what does that have to do with the promise?" she asked. Margaret leaned forward slightly. "That night, your father made a decision," she said. "If you survived, if you made it through, he would spend the rest of his life making sure other families never had to face that same choice alone." Emily stared at her, not understanding at first. Then slowly, it began to settle. The letters, the people, the help. It was not random. It was connected. Every single one of them had been in a position like hers. Families struggling, people losing everything, lives hanging in the balance. And her father stepping in, quietly, relentlessly, keeping that promise. "But why not tell me?" Emily asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret's expression grew even softer. "Because the promise wasn't about recognition," she said. "And it wasn't about being understood." She paused, then added, "It was about making sure you never felt guilty for surviving." Emily's breath caught sharply. The words hit something deep, something she had never named, never even realized was there. "You were supposed to grow up free," Margaret continued, "not carrying the weight of what it cost to save you." The room fell silent again, but this time it was not confusion. It was realization, and it hurt more than anything that came before it, because for the first time, Emily saw the full picture, and it was nothing like the one she had believed for years. "I don't remember standing up. One moment, I was sitting across from Margaret, holding those papers, trying to make sense of everything she had just said. The next, I was on my feet, pacing, breathing too fast. "No," I said. "No, that's not how it happened." But the words felt weak, not because I didn't believe them, because I was starting to. I pressed my hand against my forehead, trying to steady myself. "This doesn't change anything," I said again. I needed that to be true. I needed something to stay the same. Margaret didn't interrupt. She just watched me, patient, calm, like she had seen this moment before, like she knew what came next. "He still left," I said, my voice rising. "He still wasn't there." The words came out sharper than I expected, but they weren't directed at her. They were aimed at something deeper, something inside me that was beginning to crack. Margaret nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. That answer caught me off guard. I stopped pacing. What I asked. "He wasn't there the way you needed him to be," she said gently. I stared at her. "You're agreeing with me?" "I'm acknowledging your experience," she replied. That made it worse, because it meant she wasn't dismissing me. She wasn't telling me I was wrong. She was telling me I was right, and still incomplete. My chest tightened. "I was alone," I said. The words came out quieter now, more honest, more vulnerable than I intended. "I know," Margaret said. "And you're telling me he knew that?" I asked. "Yes, and he chose to keep going anyway." My voice shook slightly. Margaret held my gaze. "He chose to make sure you stayed alive," she said. I shook my head, stepping back. "That's not the same thing," I said. "No," she agreed. "It isn't." Silence filled the space between us. Heavy, unavoidable. I looked down at the documents again. At my name, at the numbers, at the dates that overlapped with memories I barely had. Or maybe memories I had rewritten. "I remember waiting," I said slowly. Margaret didn't speak. "I remember sitting in that hospital room, watching the door." I continued. "Every time it opened, I thought it was him." My voice cracked, and most of the time, it wasn't. The room blurred slightly. I blinked hard, trying to push it back. "I remember Mom saying he was working," I said. "That he'd come later, that he was doing something important." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "I thought that meant I wasn't." Margaret's expression shifted. There was pain in it now. Not for herself. For me. "He never believed that," she said softly. "But I did." I replied, and that was the truth. The version of my father I carried for years was not built from facts. It was built from moments, from empty chairs, from missed birthdays, from silence, and that version had shaped everything. How I saw him, how I saw myself, how I understood love. "You were a child," Margaret said gently. "You filled in the gaps the only way you could." I closed my eyes. "That doesn't make it easier," I whispered. "No," she said, "it doesn't." For a moment, neither of us spoke. I stood there caught between two realities, the one I had lived with for years, and the one unfolding in front of me now. And they didn't match. They didn't even come close. I opened my eyes again and looked at her. "Why didn't he tell me later?" I asked. "When I was older, when I could understand." Margaret hesitated this time, just slightly, and that hesitation told me the answer mattered. Because by then, she said slowly, "You had already made up your mind about him." I felt that hit somewhere deep, uncomfortable, too close to the truth, and he just accepted that I asked. "He respected it," she said. "That's not the same thing," I snapped. No, she agreed again. It isn't. I let out a shaky breath. That's not fair, I said. He doesn't get to just stay silent and let me believe something that isn't true. Margaret leaned forward slightly. And you don't get to go back and change what it felt like to be that little girl, she said gently. I froze, because she was right. Both things could be true at the same time, and that made it harder. Not easier. Tears finally blurred my vision, though I still tried to hold them back. I built my life around that, I said, around the idea that I had to rely on myself, that I couldn't depend on him. My voice broke, that I wasn't enough for him to stay. Margaret stood slowly and moved closer. She didn't touch me this time. She just stood there, close enough that I didn't feel alone. You were always enough, she said softly. I shook my head. That's not how it felt. I know. The simplicity of her response broke something in me, because she wasn't arguing. She wasn't trying to fix it. She was just acknowledging it, and somehow that made it harder to hold everything together. I wasted so many years, I said, my voice trembling now, being angry at him, pushing him away, believing he didn't care. Margaret's eyes softened. You didn't waste them, she said. You lived them with the understanding you had. That doesn't make it better, I replied. No, she said, but it makes it human. I let out a shaky breath, wiping at my eyes. The box sat on the table between us, open, exposed, full of truths I hadn't been ready to see. Until now. He's still in that hospital, I said, suddenly. Margaret nodded. Yes. I looked at her, really looked at her. What if it's too late? I asked. The question came out quietly, but it carried everything. Regret, fear, hope. Margaret held my gaze. Then you tell him anyway, she said. I swallowed. What if he doesn't want to hear it? A small, sad smile touched her lips. He's been waiting his whole life to hear it, she said. My chest tightened again, not with confusion this time, with something else, something heavier and clearer. I don't even know what to say, I admitted. Margaret reached out and gently closed the folder, then placed her hand over mine. You don't need the right words, she said softly. You just need the truth. I nodded slowly, because for the first time I understood what that meant. Not the version of the truth I had lived with, not the version that was easier to carry, but the real one, messy, complicated, painful, and necessary. I looked down at the box one more time, then back at Margaret. Thank you, I said. She smiled gently. He never stopped loving you, she said. I felt that settle inside me, not as a question, not as doubt, but as something steady, something real. And for the first time in years, I was ready to go back. The drive back felt completely different. Same roads, same distance, but everything inside me had changed. I did not turn on the radio. I did not check my phone. I did not try to distract myself. For the first time in years, I let the silence stay. Because I needed to hear my own thoughts, and they were louder than ever. Every memory I had of my father replayed itself, but now they didn't look the same. The missed birthdays, the empty chair at graduation, the late nights when I waited by the window. Before those moments had meant one thing. He chose something else over me. Now, they carried a different question. What was he choosing for me? I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. The road blurred slightly as tears threatened again. I blinked them away, forcing myself to stay focused. I was so sure, I whispered. So certain. So convinced that I understood everything. That I had already figured him out. And now, that certainty felt like a lie I had told myself for years. Not intentionally, but completely. By the time I reached the hospital, the sun had already set. The building stood the same as before. Cold, bright, unchanging. But I wasn't the same person walking through those doors. Not anymore. My steps slowed as I entered the hallway leading to his room. Each step felt heavier than the last. Not because I didn't want to go in, because I didn't know how to. What do you say to someone you misunderstood for a lifetime? What do you say when you realize you were wrong? I stopped just outside his door. My hand hovered near the handle. For a moment, I couldn't move. Fear, not of him, but of what this moment meant. If I walked in, everything would change. There would be no going back to the version of the story I had lived with. No returning to the comfort of being right. I closed my eyes briefly, then took a slow breath and opened the door. The room was quiet. The same steady rhythm of machines filled the space. He was lying in the bed exactly as I had left him. Still, tired, but awake. His eyes shifted toward me as the door closed softly behind me. For a second, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other. And in that silence, everything that had been unspoken for years sat between us. I stepped closer slowly. I went, I said. My voice sounded unfamiliar. He watched me carefully. I figured you might, he replied. There was no surprise in his tone, no tension, just quiet understanding. I swallowed. I met her? I continued. Margaret. A faint shift in his expression, something softer. She's doing well, he said. I nodded. Yes. Another silence, this one heavier, because now we both knew what I knew. I took a step closer, then another, until I was standing beside his bed. I opened the box, I said. His eyes held mine. I know, he replied. I frowned slightly. How? He gave a small, tired smile. Because you came back. That answer hit harder than I expected, because he was right. If I hadn't opened it, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be standing in this room. I wouldn't be looking at him this way. I didn't understand before, I said slowly. The words felt fragile, like they could break if I said them wrong. But I do now. He didn't respond. He just waited. Always waiting. That realization stung more than anything else. Because I had made him wait for years. I looked down at my hands for a moment, trying to steady myself. Then back at him. You paid for everything I said. Not a question. A statement. He nodded once. Yes. My throat tightened. All those years you were working, finding ways, doing whatever you had to do just to keep me alive. Another small nod. Yes. I let out a shaky breath. And I thought you didn't care. The words came out barely above a whisper. But they carried everything. All the anger, all the distance, all the years between us. He didn't flinch, didn't defend himself, didn't correct me. I know, he said. That simple answer broke something inside me, because he had known all this time. He had known what I believed, and he let me believe it. Why, I asked, my voice cracking. Why didn't you tell me? He looked at me carefully. Longer this time, as if choosing his words mattered, because it wasn't something you were supposed to carry. He said. I shook my head. That wasn't your decision to make, I replied. No, he said quietly. It wasn't. I blinked, caught off guard by the honesty. I made it anyway. He continued, because I thought protecting you from that weight was more important than being understood. The room felt smaller again, but not suffocating, just full. Full of things we had never said. I hated you, I admitted. The words slipped out before I could stop them. They hung in the air, sharp, honest, painful. I know, he said again. No anger, no hurt in his voice, just acceptance. That hurt more than anything else. Do you, I asked, my voice shaking, do you really know what that felt like for me? He met my gaze steadily. I know you felt alone, he said. My breath caught. I know you thought I chose everything else over you, he continued. Tears blurred my vision. I know you needed me there, and I wasn't. The truth of it hit hard, because he wasn't denying it. He wasn't rewriting it. He was acknowledging it, and somehow that made it real in a way it had never been before. I didn't know how to be both things at once, he said quietly. The father who stayed and the one who made sure you had a chance to stay alive. I wiped at my eyes, shaking my head. You should have tried, I said. I did, he replied. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time I saw it. The exhaustion, the years, the cost, not just financially, emotionally, physically, everything. You don't see the nights I sat outside your room after my shift ended, he said softly. You don't remember the times I came in when you were asleep just to make sure you were still breathing. My chest tightened because I didn't remember. I couldn't. You don't remember because I didn't want you to wake up and see how tired I was, he added. Silence fell again, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was fragile, like something was breaking open between us. I was there, he said quietly, just not in the way you needed me to be. Tears fell freely now, because for the first time I believed him, not because of the letters, not because of Margaret, but because of the way he said it. Simple, honest, without asking for anything in return. I'm sorry, I whispered. The words felt too small, too late, too insufficient for everything they needed to carry. But they were all I had. He didn't respond immediately. Then slowly, he reached out, his hand weak, but steady enough to rest over mine. You don't have to be, he said softly, but I shook my head. Yes, I do. Because now, I understood, and understanding came with something I couldn't ignore. The weight of everything I had been wrong about, and the truth I was only just beginning to accept. I did not pull my hand away, even though part of me wanted to, even though part of me still did not know how to sit inside this moment without feeling like I might fall apart. His hand was warm, weaker than I remembered, but steady, present. And for the first time in years, I let myself feel what that meant. Not the past, not the years of distance, just this, right here. I don't know how to fix this, I said quietly. The words came out without planning, without control, just honest, because that was all I had left. He looked at me, his expression calm in a way that almost didn't make sense. "There's nothing to fix," he said. I shook my head immediately. "That's not true," I replied. "There's too much. Too many years. Too many things I said, things I believed." My voice tightened. "I can't just pretend that didn't happen." "I'm not asking you to," he said. That stopped me, because it wasn't what I expected. "Then what are you asking?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment, not avoiding the question, just choosing his answer carefully. "I'm asking you to sit with me," he said. I frowned slightly. "That's it?" A faint smile touched his lips. "That's everything," he replied. The simplicity of it unsettled me, because I had come in expecting something bigger, a conversation that would solve everything, words that would undo the past, something clear, defined, complete. But this was something else entirely. "You're not angry?" I asked. The question slipped out before I could stop it. Because I needed to know. I needed to understand how he could sit there so calmly when I felt like everything inside me was unraveling. He shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "Why not?" I pressed. His eyes softened. "Because you were hurting," he said. I stared at him. "That doesn't mean it didn't hurt you too," I replied. "It did," he said simply. That honesty hit harder than anything else, because there was no defense in it, no attempt to minimize, just truth. "Then why didn't you say something?" I asked again. "Why let me keep believing all of that?" He looked down briefly, then back at me. "Because every time I tried, you had already decided what I was going to say," he said. I felt that land somewhere deep, uncomfortable, too close. "You didn't give me a chance," he continued. And after a while, I stopped trying to take it. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Because I remembered. The conversations that never really happened. The moments when I cut him off. The times I walked away before he could finish a sentence. I had thought I was protecting myself, setting boundaries, keeping control. But maybe I had been closing the door before he could ever step through it. "I thought I knew everything," I said quietly. "You knew what it felt like," he replied. "That's not the same thing." "No," he said, "it isn't." Silence settled between us again, but it felt different now. Not tense, not heavy, just real. I looked at him more carefully this time, not through the lens of who I believed he was, but as he was, right now. Tired, older, but still steady, still present, still here. "I missed so much," I said. The words came out slowly, each one carrying its own weight. "I missed who you really were." He didn't respond right away. Then he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "We both missed things," he said. That stopped me. "What do you mean?" I asked. He shifted slightly in the bed, his hand still resting over mine. "I missed watching you grow up the way I wanted to," he said. "I missed moments I can't get back." His voice remained steady, but there was something underneath it. Something quieter, something deeper. "I missed hearing about your day, your thoughts, your life," he continued. "Not because I didn't want to be there, but because I couldn't find a way to be there the right way." My throat tightened, because I had never thought about it like that. I had always seen what I lost, never what he lost. And now, that absence existed on both sides. I thought you didn't care about those things, I admitted. I cared about them more than anything he said. The certainty in his voice made it impossible to doubt. I just didn't know how to reach you once you stopped letting me in. That sentence broke something in me, because I knew exactly when that happened. I remembered the moment I decided I was done trying, the moment I told myself I didn't need him anymore. And I had carried that decision forward like it was strength, like it was independence. But now, it looked different. It looked like distance, like a wall I had built, and then blamed him for not climbing. I thought I was protecting myself, I said. You were, he replied gently. But I also pushed you away, I added. Yes, he said. No hesitation, no denial, just truth. I let out a shaky breath. I don't know how to do this, I admitted again. This being here, with you, without all the anger. He gave a faint smile. You're already doing it, he said. I looked at him confused. How? You stayed, he replied. The words settled quietly between us. Stayed. Such a simple thing. And yet, it felt bigger than anything else, because for years I hadn't. I don't want it to leave this time, I said softly. His eyes held mine. You don't have to, he said. Tears blurred my vision again, but I didn't look away. I don't know how much time we have, I did. He exhaled slowly. Neither do I, and to leave this time, I said softly. His eyes held mine. You don't have to, he said. Tears blurred my vision again, but I didn't look away. I don't know how much time we have, I added. He exhaled slowly. Neither do I. The honesty of that moment sat heavy, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just real. Time was no longer something we could assume. It was something we had to use. Carefully, intentionally. I want to understand everything I said. You will, he replied, and I want you to understand me too. He nodded. I already do more than you think. That surprised me. How, I asked. He looked at me with a quiet certainty. Because I watched you become who you are, even from a distance, he said. My chest tightened. I was proud of you, he added. The words landed softly, but they carried years of silence inside them. I wish you had told me that before I whispered. I do too, he said. Another shared truth. Another moment we couldn't change, but could finally acknowledge. I tightened my grip on his hand slightly. Not out of fear, not out of desperation, but because I wanted to. Because for the first time, it felt right. Not perfect, not complete, but real. And that was enough to begin. The machines were the first to change. It was subtle at first, a shift in rhythm, a slight irregularity in the steady, predictable sounds that had filled the room for hours. I noticed it before I understood it. My eyes moved instinctively toward the monitor, watching the lines flicker in a way they hadn't before. Dad, I said softly. He didn't respond right away. His hand was still over mine, but there was a new weight to it. Heavier, less responsive. Dad, I repeated louder this time. His eyes were still open, but something in them had changed. The sharpness, the focus. It was fading. A cold wave of panic rushed through me. No, I whispered. I stood up quickly, my chair scraping against the floor. "Doctor," I called out, my voice breaking. "Nurse!" The door opened almost immediately, 2 nurses rushing in, followed by a doctor. Everything moved fast after that, voices overlapping, instructions being given, machines beeping louder, now more urgent. I stepped back instinctively, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break through my chest. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice barely holding together. One of the nurses glanced at me briefly. "We need you to step outside," she said gently. "No," I said immediately. "I'm staying." There was no hesitation in my voice this time, no uncertainty. I wasn't leaving. Not again. The doctor looked at me for a moment, then nodded slightly. "Stay back, but you can remain," he said. I moved to the side of the room, my eyes locked on my father. Everything felt unreal, like I was watching something happen from a distance, like I was not fully inside my own body. But I was. Every second, every sound, every movement. It was all too real. "Benjamin, stay with us," the doctor said firmly. My father's chest rose and fell unevenly now, the effort of each breath visible, painful. I had never seen him like this before, not even when I was a child, because he never let me. And now, there was no hiding it. "Dad," I said, stepping closer despite myself. One of the nurses gently held me back, but I leaned forward anyway. "I'm here," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." His eyes shifted slightly, searching, then found me. For a brief moment, they focused again, not fully, but enough. "Emily," he whispered. My chest tightened so sharply I could barely breathe. "I'm here," I said again, my voice breaking completely now. "I'm right here." His fingers moved slightly against mine, weak but intentional, as if he was holding on. Not just to life, but to me. "You stayed," he said, barely audible. Tears streamed down my face. "I told you I would," I said. "I'm not leaving." His lips moved again, but no sound came out at first. The doctor was speaking, the nurses were adjusting something, but all I could focus on was him. "Listen to me," I said, quickly, stepping closer again. I didn't care anymore about staying back. I didn't care about anything except this moment. "You don't have to worry about anything," I said. "I understand now. I understand everything." His eyes stayed on mine, fading, but present. "I was wrong," I continued, my voice shaking. "I was so wrong about you." The words came out faster now, desperate. "I thought you didn't care. I thought you chose everything else over me, but you didn't. You chose me. You always chose me." His hand tightened slightly, just enough that I felt it, and it broke me. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it." The machines continued their urgent rhythm, the doctor's voice sharper now. But none of that mattered. Only this, only him. "You don't have to explain anything anymore," I said. "You don't have to prove anything. I know who you are now." His breathing slowed, not steady, but slower. His eyes softened, and in that moment, I saw something I had never seen before. Relief. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just quiet, deep, real. "You know," he murmured. "Yes," I said immediately. "I know." Tears blurred everything, but I didn't look away. I couldn't. I see you, I said. I finally see you. His chest rose one more time, slow, deliberate, then fell. The room seemed to pause. Just for a second. The machines filled the silence, but something had changed. Something final. No, I whispered, shaking my head. The doctor stepped forward, checking quickly. Then slowly, he looked at me. And I knew. Before he said anything, before the machines changed, before the nurses stepped back. I knew. I felt my knees weaken, but I stayed standing. I had promised. I wasn't leaving. Not this time. I stepped closer gently, taking my father's hand in both of mine. It was still warm, still him, but still. Thank you, I whispered. My voice barely made it out. For everything. Tears fell freely now, unstoppable, uncontrolled. But I didn't try to stop them. I didn't try to hold anything back. I'm here, I said again, even though he couldn't hear me anymore. I stayed. The room was quiet now, the urgency gone, replaced by something else. Stillness. Final, but not empty. Because, for the first time, there was nothing left unsaid between us. And even though it hurt more than anything I had ever felt, there was something else there too. Something I hadn't expected. Peace. The days after he passed did not feel real. People talk about grief like it arrives all at once, like a storm that hits and leaves everything in ruins. But for me, it came in waves. Quiet. Unexpected. Sometimes gentle. Sometimes unbearable. The first morning I woke up without him in the world felt wrong in a way I could not explain. Nothing had changed. The sunlight still came through the window. The city still moved outside. My phone still filled with notifications I did not care about. But something fundamental had shifted. The person I had just begun to understand was gone. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time that morning, holding my phone, staring at his name in my recent calls. I almost dialed it, out of habit, out of denial, out of a desperate, irrational hope that he would answer. But I didn't, because I knew. Instead, I opened the box. It was the first thing I reached for. Not my work, not my emails, not the life I had carefully built. The box. I sat on the floor, this time not the couch. Closer, grounded, like I needed to feel everything more clearly. I opened it slowly, not with fear anymore, but with something else. Reverence. Every letter I touched felt different now. Not just stories, not just evidence, but pieces of him. Pieces I had missed. Pieces I was only now beginning to hold properly. I read them all, not quickly, not searching for answers anymore. Just reading, understanding, feeling. There was a rhythm to them, a pattern that went beyond words. People at their lowest, families on the edge of losing everything, and him stepping in, quietly, without asking for anything in return. I paused on one letter longer than the others. A woman writing about her son. Sick, hospitalized, uncertain if he would make it. The words blurred for a moment, because I recognized that story. It was mine. Not exactly, but close enough. And for the first time, I didn't just see what my father had done. I felt why he had done it. I closed my eyes, holding the letter tightly. You kept your promise, I whispered, not just to them, but to me. In a way I had never understood before. Days turned into weeks, and slowly I started to do something I never expected. I began reaching out, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The letters had names, addresses, stories that did not end with what was written on the page. So I followed them, one by one, carefully, respectfully. The first person I contacted was Margaret. She answered on the second ring. "Emily?" She said, her voice warm, steady. "I was hoping you'd call." I smiled slightly, even through the heaviness still sitting in my chest. "I've been going through the letters," I said. "I thought you might," she replied. There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, just shared understanding. "I want to continue what he started," I said. The words came out before I could overthink them. But once they were said, they felt right. Margaret didn't respond immediately. Then I heard a soft breath on the other end of the line. "He would like that," she said quietly. "I don't know how yet," I admitted. "I don't know what it looks like. You don't have to know everything," she said. "Just start with one step." One step. That was something I understood. That was something I could do. So I did. I reached out to another name, and another. Some didn't respond. Some did, and each conversation added something new. Not just about my father, but about the impact he had, the lives he touched. The quiet chain reaction of kindness that had spread further than I could have imagined. One evening, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by letters and notes I had started to organize. The box was still there, open, but no longer heavy in the same way. It felt alive, like it was no longer holding something hidden, but something growing. I picked up my phone and hesitated for a moment, then opened my contacts, scrolled to his name. Not to call, but to keep it, to not delete it, because now it meant something different. Not absence, not loss, but connection. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath. "I see you now," I said softly, and for the first time since that hospital room, the words didn't hurt. They settled, steady, true. I looked around my apartment, the same space, the same life, but it didn't feel small anymore, because now it was connected to something bigger, something I had not seen before, but could no longer ignore. I reached for a blank piece of paper and a pen, and started writing. Not a letter, not yet, but something else. A plan. Simple, small, but real. Because if there was one thing I had learned from my father, it was that change doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from showing up, again and again, quietly, consistently, even when no one sees. I placed the pen down and looked at what I had written, then nodded to myself. "This is how it starts," I said. Not perfectly, not completely, but honestly, and for the first time in my life. That felt like enough. Life lesson and reflection. Sometimes the people we misunderstand the most are the ones who love us in ways we do not recognize yet. We expect love to look a certain way, to sound a certain way, to be present in the moments we define as important. But love is not always loud. It is not always visible. Sometimes it is quiet, sacrificial, hidden behind choices that do not make sense until much later. This story is a reminder that truth is rarely simple, that pain and love can exist at the same time. And that understanding often comes too late unless we choose to look deeper. If you are holding on to anger towards someone in your life, ask yourself this: is it possible there is something you have not seen yet? And if there is, are you willing to find out? Because sometimes healing does not come from being right. It comes from being open. If this story touched you, I would really love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever misunderstood someone important in your life or realized the truth too late? Share your experience in the comments. And if you are watching from somewhere in the world right now, tell me where you are and what time it is for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want more stories like this, your support means more than you know. Sometimes the deepest truths in life are not hidden because they are complicated, but because we are not ready to see them. We grow up believing we understand the people around us, especially those closest to us. We create stories in our minds based on what we feel, what we experience, and what we think is missing. And over time, those stories become our truth. But the reality is what we feel is not always the full picture. There are people who love quietly, people who sacrifice without explanation, people who carry burdens in silence so that we never have to feel the weight of them. And sometimes we mistake that silence for absence, that sacrifice for indifference. The hardest part is realizing this truth too late. But maybe too late is not about time. Maybe it is about awareness. Because the moment we truly understand, we are given something rare, a chance to forgive, to heal, and to see love in a completely different way. If this story touched your heart, I would love to hear from you. Have you ever misunderstood someone important in your life, or realized their love only after it was almost too late? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else feel less alone. And if you believe in stories that heal, that reveal truth, and that remind us what really matters, don't forget to subscribe and stay with this channel. You never know which story might change the way you see your own.